Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump reviewing the new surveillance footage released by the FBI on the Nancy Guthrie case. A new development in the Nancy Guthrie case, a surveillance photo of a potential subject has been released. Meanwhile, a purported ransom deadline passes. The House Homeland Security Committee holds a hearing on President Trump's immigration agenda. Senior officials detail progress made under the administration. Chinese Communist Party money flowing into American nonprofits. Lawmakers say it's fueling protests, pushing radical policies, and undermining U.S. elections. We'll break down the investigation on Capitol Hill.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. An update on the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. Authorities have released the surveillance photos of a potential subject. Meanwhile, the passing of a second deadline for a ransom note, and still the Guthrie family has not deposited any money in the anonymous Bitcoin account. NTD's Arlene Richards has more on the latest.
Authorities have released images and video from a doorbell camera showing a potential subject in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County, Arizona Sheriff's Office posted on social media that law enforcement uncovered previously inaccessible new images showing an armed individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance. The released images were recovered from residual data on the back end. Sheriff Chris Nano said his department is working closely with their law enforcement partners, and they will continue to recover any images or video footage from Nancy Guthrie's home. The search for Nancy Guthrie enters its 10th day, and today's show host Savannah Guthrie and her siblings still have no proof that their 84-year-old mother is still alive.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
Stay on the street. The second purported deadline for a ransom of $6 million has passed, but the family hasn't made a payment. Nancy Guthrie's alleged kidnappers demanded payment to an anonymous Bitcoin account by 5 p.m. Monday. Just hours before that deadline, Savannah Guthrie posted a heartfelt message thanking the public for their prayers, but asking for something else.
No matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement.
Several states appear to be responding to her plea. New billboards going up across the country urging anyone with information about the case to call authorities. Meanwhile, in a statement to News Nation, the FBI said Monday that it isn't aware of ongoing communication between Guthrie's family and any suspected kidnappers. Law enforcement is continuing their investigation. Outside Nancy Guthrie's home, neighbors are starting a vigil.
It's very shocking, and it's very shocking. Our Tucson is a beautiful, nice, calm city, and for something like this to happen, it's kind of shakes us at the root of our family, of our Tucson here. It's horrible, horrific.
It's been more than a week since Nancy Guthrie went missing. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings haven't given up hope that their mother is still out there.
I really wish them well, and hang in there. We're going to get her back.
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Today's show co-host Savannah Guthrie immediately responded to those surveillance images and video footage released by authorities earlier this afternoon. Guthrie reposted the images on Instagram saying, "We believe she is still alive. Bring her home." She's asking the public to call the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff with any information. FBI Director Kash Patel posted additional images and video footage of the individual who is wearing a ski mask, a backpack, and gloves. Patel says the images and videos come from the same camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance. A 4-second video shows the individual, who appears to be a man, approaching Nancy Guthrie's door with his head down. ABC News reports that the FBI is not describing the individual as a suspect. President Trump reviewing the newly released surveillance footage from the FBI that shows a potential suspect in the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping outside her Arizona home. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the White House. Mari, good afternoon.
Don, good afternoon. That's right. And today at her briefing, Press Secretary Leavitt at the top said that she had just come from a meeting with President Trump where the two of them were reviewing that newly released surveillance footage. That footage, as you said, was taken from Nancy Guthrie's front door the night that she disappeared from her Arizona home. The doorbell camera footage shows a masked and armed individual who appears to have, quote, tampered with the camera, according to FBI Director Kash Patel. And the White House says that President Trump, after seeing this, encourages any American across the country who knows anything about the suspect to please call the FBI. Leavitt also reiterates that the prayers of the entire White House are with Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie, and the entire Guthrie family. And then they hope the suspect is found soon and that Guthrie is brought home safely. Here's the White House today with the president's initial reaction. Take a look.
His initial reaction, of course, as all Americans, is just pure disgust. And again, it's heartbreaking to see now this footage really bring to life a story we've all been reading about. And again, we're just praying for the safety of Nancy Guthrie and that she will return home soon. And the president directed me to please encourage all Americans with any information to call the FBI. And we hope that this case will come to a positive resolution as soon as possible. I think anyone who was involved in this depraved crime, this abduction, of course, we want to be seen held to the fullest extent of the law possible.
Press Secretary Leavitt also shares some of President Trump's upcoming schedule for the rest of the week, and the White House now confirms that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be visiting the White House tomorrow for a bilateral meeting with President Trump to talk Iran negotiations. That urgent meeting was moved a week earlier than was originally planned, and meanwhile, President Trump's repeatedly been warning the Iranian regime against developing a nuclear weapon and against killing anti-regime protesters. And while President Trump has expressed optimism and said that diplomacy is always the first option, Axios is now reporting that the president says today that he's considering sending a second group of aircraft carrier strikes to the Middle East to prepare for military action if those negotiations with Iran ultimately end up failing. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. The White House says President Trump is monitoring the situation with Nancy Guthrie after new surveillance photos are released today.
I was once again with the president. He and I were both reviewing the newly released surveillance footage from FBI in the Savannah Guthrie case on just this heartbreaking situation with respect to her mother. The president encourages any American across the country with any knowledge of the suspect to please call the FBI, who continue to assist state and local authorities who are leading this investigation on the ground. And once again, I will reiterate that the prayers of this entire White House are with Savannah and her family at this time. And we hope this person is found soon and that her mother is brought home safely.
The White House says it wants to see whoever is responsible for Guthrie's disappearance held to the fullest extent of the law possible. The press secretary previews the president's schedule this week. It includes meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Wednesday and celebrating coal as America's most reliable and affordable energy source. On Thursday, Trump and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin will formally rescind the 2009 Obama-era endangerment finding on greenhouse gases.
This will be the largest deregulatory action in American history, and it will save the American people $1.3 trillion in crushing regulations. The bulk of the savings will stem from reduced costs for new vehicles, with the EPA projecting average per vehicle savings of more than $2,400 for popular light-duty cars, SUVs, and trucks.
Leavitt says Trump's deregulation will make life more affordable for everyday Americans, drive larger economic growth, create thousands of good-paying jobs, expand manufacturing, and increase consumer choice. She's also announcing that parents can start applying for a Trump savings account for their children now. You can visit trumpaccounts.gov to find out more. And on Friday, the president will travel to Fort Bragg in North Carolina to meet with the special forces who successfully brought dictator Nicolas Maduro out of Venezuela in January. House lawmakers are sounding the alarm over foreign money flowing into American nonprofits. They say groups tied to the Chinese Communist Party are using U.S. tax breaks to fund protests, push radical policies, and influence elections.
Many of these tax-exempt groups also have documented ties to hostile foreign governments. like the Chinese Communist Party. The People's Forum, an American tax-exempt group who I demanded documents from in September. It hosts events and courses pushing Communist Party propaganda, incites violent protests and riots, including disruptive occupations of college campuses, and publicly supported Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. And it's no wonder that the People's Forum echoes Communist Party propaganda.
Push Communist China propaganda. They do all kinds of things like the People's Forum, as you said. It both trains and organizes for protests on multiple issues all over America. Other groups operate YouTube channels to reach youth. Others operate fake news websites. Still more, lobby Congress, operate the Tricontinental Institute, a Marxist think tank, support candidates for office in multiple countries. And in all cases, by the way, they don't just boost the communist government of China.
The impact of this money is ongoing. Federal property vandalized at Union Station, American flags burned and police officers assaulted, airports blocked at JFK and LAX, Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges shut down, ambulances and commuters disrupted, Wall Street blockaded, holiday commerce halted at Macy's Herald Square, and immigration and law enforcement facilities targeted. This is not grassroots protest. It is a repeatable system for paralyzing American infrastructure on demand, financed through U.S. tax law and aligned with a hostile foreign power.
We've identified is that there is no real requirement that a 501c4 on that Form 990 discloses anywhere that they are receiving foreign funds. This is a huge threat to foreign interference in our elections, and we must close this loophole.
Joining us now to discuss this is Michael Lucci, founder and CEO of State Armor. Michael, always great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. So lawmakers on the House Ways and Means Committee are discussing this tie between left groups and the Chinese Communist Party. So which groups are we talking about exactly?
Well, there are actually thousands of groups within the United States, but the ones being highlighted today are Neville Roy Singham's People's Forum. It's Christopher Hohn's Children's Investment Fund. It's all sorts of organizations like those with these very innocuous and innocent names. But what they're actually doing is sowing chaos, waging ideological warfare, and exploiting our openness to push the Chinese Communist Party's narrative within the United States, but then also to get us at war with ourselves within the United States. They mentioned that these groups support Hamas. They've taken over campuses. This is chaos and it's division, and it gets us to fight ourselves on issues where we should be unified.
Okay, can you speak to us about the nature of these links? Clarify for us what exactly is meant by CCP aligned. I mean, is this different from being funded by the CCP, or is it the same?
Well, you have both. You have both. Some of these organizations, like the People's Forum, are funded by Neville Roy Singham. Where his money's actually coming from is one question, but he's coming from Shanghai. He works in an office in Shanghai. He nearly shares space with a Chinese Communist Party propaganda organization. Some of the other money comes from England. Some of it is Chinese, some of it's not Chinese, but the ultimate issue is control. And let me give you one specific example. Energy Foundation China, which is very clearly a nonprofit organization controlled by Beijing, is actually largely funded by American interests. So American interests pour hundreds of millions of dollars into this organization. This organization then goes around and tries to dictate climate policy so that we get addicted to Chinese technologies that have kill switches in it. And so it's American money with Chinese control. Sometimes they put the money in, but they would actually prefer that we put the money in. They control it to really destroy our society.
So I brought a clip here with me from some moments of the hearing today. Let's just take a quick look at that.
The People's Forum, an American tax-exempt group who I demanded documents from in September. It hosts events and courses pushing Communist Party propaganda, incites violent protests and riots, including disruptive occupations of college campuses, and publicly supported Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack against Israel.
So, Michael, I'm wondering if you can just talk to us a little bit more here about the People's Forum.
This is an organization that trains agitators and funds them to agitate. Most recently, we've seen them doing these camping sites on campus where they try to take over campus. They agitate on behalf of Hamas, which is, of course, a foreign terrorist organization under United States law. They agitate on behalf of those folks. They sow a great amount of anti-Semitism within the United States. They cheered the terrorist attacks upon Israel by Hamas. So it's really a group of people who are in favor of whoever's against the United States. Neville Roy Singham is really the godfather behind this. He has a lot of money himself. Whether it's his specific money or whether it's money that's getting filtered in from the Chinese Communist Party is an open question, which speaks to the importance of the hearings today, which is we really don't know. We know that the money's coming in. It's not transparent where it's coming from. It's not reported where it's coming from. But what we do know is it's aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, and it benefits from a tax deduction under our nonprofit laws. So there needs to be transparency about where all this money's from. But as setting aside the transparency issue, they should not get nonprofit designations to work on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party within the United States. What they should get is sanctioned and deported from the United States.
So, Michael, earlier you said the CCP wants the U.S. to fight itself. Talk to us more about that. What is the CCP's ultimate goal here, the end game? Just lay it out for us clearly. What does it matter if the U.S. fights with itself? How does that matter to Beijing?
Beijing's broader strategy, and they're extremely open about this, it's called their United Front strategy. They say it's their number one tool in warfare against the United States. In short, they will ally against anyone they'll ally with anyone who is against the United States, both external to the United States and internal to the United States. So there are groups internal to the United States that are supported by Hamas. There are groups inside the United States like the Democrat Socialists of America who are really fundamentally against what the United States stands for. So they ally with those groups, they empower those groups, and then they fund those groups so that we just have internal chaos and we're not able to pay attention to what China's doing externally. Its basic warfare strategy is divide and conquer. So they want to divide the United States up within itself so that they can ultimately conquer our position on the world stage. And they say that. They say that the purpose of their United Front strategy is to ultimately displace the United States as the world's leading power.
And what you just said right now should raise alarms to everyone in the U.S., regardless of, what political ideals you hold. And I just want to ask you one last question here. What needs to be done to root out this malign influence in the U.S.?
There's multiple levels of what needs to be done, federal and state. One, foreign agent registration needs to be broadened and made more transparent, specifically for adversaries and terrorist organizations within the United States. Two, the entire United Front apparatus should be defined and sanctioned. Everybody involved with it who's not a United States citizen should be deported back to wherever they came from. Three, we need to enact laws that increase penalties. These are transnational repression laws, increase penalties for whatever these organizations do that's on the criminal side. Four, take away their nonprofit status. There's over 50 of these in the city of New York that are violating election law by using their nonprofit status to influence elections within New York. And then last, we need much more transparency, and good news on that front. Jamestown Foundation, a great organization in the United States, is about to publish tomorrow morning a listing of 1,000 United Front organizations active in the United States. Transparency, and then take them down.
Terrific analysis from you today, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The former campaign advisor of a Southern California City Council member was sentenced to 4 years in prison yesterday. He was accused of acting as an agent for China without notifying U.S. authorities. Sun Yao-ning, also known as Mike Sun, worked as a campaign advisor in the 2022 City Council race in Arcadia, Los Angeles suburb. He was arrested at the end of 2024. Prosecutors say he sought to influence U.S. politicians on the issue of Taiwan and to suppress Chinese dissidents on U.S. soil, including practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual group persecuted by Beijing. Sun also kept close tabs on then Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen during her April 2023 visit to Southern California, reporting her movements directly to Chinese officials. On top of all that, he ran a news website aimed at the local Chinese American community, posting content that supported the Chinese Communist Party. A judge says California's law forcing ICE agents to remove their masks is unlawful. More news after this break. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Jane Seymour, and I spent years on TV playing a doctor. But I learned about the heartbreaking reality of heart disease and stroke.
2 men plead guilty in federal court to committing fraud in Minnesota. Prosecutors say they could face multiple years in prison. The 2 men plead guilty to repeatedly traveling from Philadelphia to Minneapolis to defraud Minnesota's Housing Stabilization Services program of over $3 million. They concealed the scheme by using artificial intelligence to create fake records when questioned by insurance companies. Prosecutors say the individuals had no connection to the Minnesota community. They traveled from Pennsylvania to Minnesota solely to defraud the system there. The sentencing is scheduled to be announced at a later date. And President Trump's immigration agenda under the spotlight today on Capitol Hill, senior officials testifying before the House Homeland Security Committee.
We have imposed consequences for those who break our laws, the laws that this body enacted. And today, the United States, because of these efforts, enjoys the most secure border in our nation's history. But this progress did not happen by accident. It's a result of a comprehensive approach to border security. We ended catch and release, we prioritized detention and removal authorities, and we sent a clear message that illegal entry into the United States will not be tolerated. And the numbers speak for themselves.
Customs and Border Protection says illegal crossings into the U.S. are at a record low. Commissioner Rodney Scott reports that daily encounters have dropped by 95%, averaging about 250 per day. Scott said that figure is compared to 5,000 a day under the Biden administration. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons says agents are facing the most dangerous environment in agency history.
In fiscal year 2025, death threats against ICE personnel increased more than 8,000%. Assaults on officers have skyrocketed over 1,400%. One officer in Minnesota had his finger bitten off by a protester, egged on by elected officials characterizing our officers as Gestapo or secret police. The families of ICE personnel have been made to feel unsafe in their homes. I know this firsthand because my own family was targeted. But let me send a message to anyone who thinks they can intimidate us. You will fail. Despite these perils, our officers continue to execute their mission with unwavering resolve.
In addition to arrests, deportations, and border security, the director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services says his agency is working to end the exploitation of immigration programs. The director is saying the agency made nearly 33,000 fraud referrals to law enforcement over the past year. Investigators have uncovered marriage fraud, visa abuse, and student visa abuses as well. The director said those discoveries have led to denials of immigration benefits, arrests, and removal proceedings. DHS officials testified today before the House Homeland Security Committee. Joining us to discuss is Scott Mikowski, former New York Field Office Deputy Director for ICE. He's also a visiting fellow for deportation studies at the Oversight Project. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So good afternoon to you both. Scott, let me start with you today. Todd Lyons, the acting head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, he said today local officials in Minneapolis were not honoring ICE detainers for dangerous criminals. And Representative Michael McCall said that the ICE agents were thrown into these tense situations due in part to that. Can we get your reaction?
Yeah, well, it's been an ongoing issue with sanctuary cities. They self-identify as sanctuary cities. It makes it more difficult because we don't have the safe transfer of criminal aliens from the county or the city, state to the federal authorities. So it makes it very dangerous. And we have to go out into these communities. Well, the officers have to go out into these communities and they have to operate in those communities. And they don't get any police, they're not getting any cooperation from the police. the sheriffs, anybody in those jurisdictions because of the sanctuary city policies. So it makes it very difficult.
So, Tony, your reaction to what the lawmakers said that these ICE agents were thrown into this chaos?
I mean, it's 100% correct. So first of all, there, I remember from basic, as much as a lot of individuals do, there are two things that are a terrible situation to be in. Number one, entering a house as law enforcement or as military blind, i.e. having no information about what it is that you're going into, who's there, what else could be there that's concerning. And then number two, not being able to distinguish a target or something to prosecute versus an observer or someone who might be a civilian in the area. That is both of which of these are present in Minneapolis, where you have individuals that are switching from legal observer to antagonizing to obstructing federal law enforcement to trying to impede the arrests at a moment's notice. Of course, they're blowing whistles. They're trying to disorient federal law enforcement. And they're also being forced to go in blind, or a lot more blind than federal agents in other situations, because the city and, of course, the state law enforcement agencies refuse to work with ICE whatsoever. And so, yeah, these officers are in terribly horrible situations. It's unsafe. It's despicable. They're treated this way. And again, the intense argument for removing their masks is not so that they can be held accountable, but it's to dox them and their families and put them at risk so that those blowing whistles there can go throw a Molotov at the ICE agent's house later that evening.
So, Scott, what do you make of Democrat demands that ICE agents should remove their masks, despite, Lyons saying that his agency has been seeing an 8,000% rise in death threats?
Yeah, I think Director Lyons, he understands what's going on, and he has a duty to protect the officers and agents that are operating out there. All this talk with Congress, all of the rhetoric they're throwing back and forth about the masks, it isn't about identification. But believe me, there's a lot of metadata out there. If something's filmed and something's reported, the Inspector General, OPR, they get to the bottom of all of this. I mean, ICE knows who's
correct,
what location. They know exactly what agents are out there operating. I mean, if Congress wanted to view any of this data, they could call a hearing and they'd be able to get it from OPR, OIG, et cetera, or the FBI, anybody they want. I mean, we don't operate in a vacuum. They're operating under the laws that Congress enacted. And all of this talk about funding and defunding is just pure grandstanding. It's a guardrail. Look, ICE is already funded. We know that. Okay. They want to take the funding away from them. They want to threaten taking the funding away from them. Yeah, they're not taking it away from ICE. They're going to take it away from FEMA, TSA. And then, so it goes back to this argument, right? They need to legislate instead of, grandstanding. I mean, asking people if they think they're going to go to heaven or hell. I mean, it's just outright. That's how childish this all is, and we're supposed to take them seriously. We don't. Todd Lyons absolutely has a duty to protect the men and women of ICE.
Okay, Tony, a few more reactions here. So Lyons said Tom Homan, now at the helm of the situation, has led to de-escalation. The protests have subsided more, and ICE can do more targeted operations. What are you seeing?
So just a quick note on something Scott said, the heaven or hell comment by Representative LaMonica McIver and the theater that are these committees, with it getting on camera, and the lady who body slammed federal agents asking people about how they directed the care of their ICE officers in Minneapolis is laughable and despicable. In contrast, Tom Homan is what Americans want in this situation. Tom Homan is a calm, cool, collected, serious, to the point, distinguished, decorated member of law enforcement. He has done phenomenal work his entire career, and I'm going to level with you both. Americans want their vision of a cool, calm, collected airline pilot in situations like these. When you get onto an airline, you want a nice, normal, seasoned voice telling you things are going to be good. Here's what we're doing. No funny business, no nonsense, and getting down to work. That is exactly what Tom Homan does every single time. And yes, correct. Once things de-escalate, it turns out after a couple of 7:30 a.m. press conferences, things get down to business. And yes, we are seeing ICE be able to work without as much harassment and nonsense now, because Homan is making it far more cut and dried. And may I say also, putting things in a light that if the opposing side the fake legal observers per se, want to get in there and mix it up a little bit. They don't have as much time to grandstand before they are cuffed and taken away from the scene.
All right, speaking of the opposing side, Scott, one question was raised during that hearing along the lines of how does deporting an individual without even a traffic ticket make America safer? Can you respond to that?
Listen, immigration law is clear, okay? There's a process to come into the country. You know, millions have been led into this country unvetted. Whether they have a criminal history or not in the country or origin where they came from is unknown to us. We don't get that data. So the thought of, look, immigration, the system, if Congress wanted just to deport criminals, then have Congress go back to the table and rewrite the laws. But there's statutes, and illegal entry is a statute. It's illegal to come into the country. It's illegal to overstay. It's illegal to commit fraud and to gain a benefit. So it doesn't matter whether or not they've been locked up for rape, murder. It doesn't matter. If you violate the immigration laws, ICE, by Congress, is duly sworn to go out and operate, arrest these people, and remove them from the United States. That's why we have bars. We have bars for people who enter illegally, commit no crimes. They go through a system, get voluntary departure for the most part, ignore that order. That's a benefit. They ignore that. And then we have to go and locate these people. And then once they're located, we remove them. They're barred. If Congress doesn't want that, have Congress sit at the table and decide that.
Okay, Tony, your reaction to the same thing. And also, I want to ask you, where do you stand on requiring ICE to have judicial warrants before entering private property?
Well, first of all, on the good side of things, because Scott knows exactly where I'm about to go. My friend at the Oversight Project is exactly correct, and has been consistently when it comes to the expectations of law enforcement. If you go in to any kind of a situation, if I'm at a party where people are doing coke and the cops come in and they say, hey, there are people doing coke here, guess what? I'm also being detained as well. And if there is any kind of a warrant out for my arrest, whether it's for jaywalking or for sticking gum at the New York subway station, they're going to take me in, because just because I'm not related to what is being done there doesn't mean they can ignore the law in my case because I look like a real swell guy. But in contrast here to your particular question, I really do not believe right now that at least in the context of ICE, of moving forward, that there is anything specifically that we're going to be able to see in types of long-term reform. We're actually going to see Congress move in and tackle some of these laws and get things mixed around, because it's far easier just for the next administration through prosecutorial discretion to kind of make up their own rules along the way. And that's a definitely a blight on what this country was set up to do. And so there are far too many things that don't matter as much, because until Congress starts doing its job, then the executive branch and the law enforcement officers are going to shoulder the burden.
Okay, Scott, where do you stand on judicial warrants, and where do you stand on whether ICE agents need more body cameras?
Listen, I'm all for the body cameras, okay? I think this is going to be a benefit for the men and women of ICE and all of law enforcement, Border Patrol, everything else. And I think that now that's kind of their bluff has been called, I think the other side of this, the protesters and stuff now are going to be arguing, oh my God, now they're going to be able to film us. I mean, even in the instance with the Renee Good shooting, they were complaining about an ICE officer with his cell phone trying to document who it was. They were upset about that. I mean, he was just doing his job. He has to, because when he goes for an arrest warrant or something of that nature, they're going to ask for the proof. I'm all for the body cameras now for these officers. And I'll tell you, the judicial warrant argument is it's overblown. Okay, look, we've had administrative warrants in this country forever. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say anything about judicial warrants, okay? A DOJ judge, a Department of Justice judge, is the one that signs the order, okay? All the immigration officers do to make it administrative, the I-200, 205, is signed by an official after a judge has already signed the warrant. I mean, Congress knows this. They want to play this up, this judicial warrant. If Congress wants that, go back to the table and absolutely enact that in law. But it's just waste, fraud, and abuse at this point.
Right. All right, Tony, let me get just one more comment from you. And I want to see what you think about, during the hearing, Representative Seth Magaziner showed a clip of an agent pepper spraying a protester at close range who was already pinned down, which he said was improper use of the device because the protester was already neutralized. Do you think agents need more oversight? What do you think on this?
So I think those are two different questions. Did I see it? Did I think that it was necessary to be pepper sprayed in the face at that distance? No. But you know what? When you have 847 per day interactions between an officer and a high tense, high extreme situation because of all of the agitation, because of the obstruction, et cetera, you're going to have some mistakes. And again, when I'm looking at one mistake here out of 20,000 interactions, I would say that that's even a conservative estimate given what we know and how clearly this is documented. I'm going to tell you, yeah, occasionally you're going to have some mistakes, but that doesn't mean that we throw the baby out with the bathwater and then arm ICE agents with a teddy bear and hugs going forward. I don't think that's necessarily effective. And as far as accountability and oversight, the Democrats, again, the suggestions they made so far is body cameras, which I'm very much in favor of. They're already backtracking. And they also, again, the judicial warrant system, as my counterpart here said, doesn't even make any sense given that immigration was never even supposed to fit under the traditional law enforcement, civilian law enforcer interaction here in this country. I mean, when they're turned away at the border, there's not an immigration judge going, now, hold on, did you read them their Miranda rights? No, that's not how that works. And it's not how it was supposed to be set up in the Constitution. And so, again, all of the accountability measures would be a lot less necessary if you just let ICE do their job. And if Congress doesn't like it, Congress can change the law.
Okay, great points from both of you, if I do say so myself. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Don, Scott, you guys are great.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And two big wins in court for the Trump administration. A judge says California's law enforcing ICE agents to remove their masks is unlawful, and an appeals court ruling on temporary protected status. Here's the story.
A federal judge blocking part of a California law that would have stopped law enforcement officers from wearing masks on the job, saying the rule unfairly targets federal agents. The ruling sides with the Trump administration in a legal fight over two California laws aimed at federal immigration enforcement. The judge finding that the state's No Secret Police Act did not apply equally to all officers, and ruling California cannot enforce a mask ban against federal agents. On X, Attorney General Pam Bondi praising the decision, saying these federal agents are harassed, doxxed, obstructed, and attacked on a regular basis just for doing their jobs. The state's second law, requiring visible identification, was allowed to stand. California passed both laws after federal immigration operations in the state last year. Meanwhile, a federal appeals court is clearing the way for the Trump administration to end temporary protected status for immigrants from three countries, Nepal, Honduras, and Nicaragua. The Ninth Circuit says it is putting a lower court ruling on hold while the case is appealed. The panel explained TPS exists for foreign nationals who cannot return safely to their home country because of extraordinary circumstances like armed conflict or natural disaster. The judges pointing out the Secretary of Homeland Security is required to regularly review whether those conditions still exist, saying if they don't, TPS must be terminated. In a post on X, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem saying TPS was never designed to be permanent, yet previous administrations have used it as a de facto amnesty program for decades. Nepalese citizens were granted TPS following a devastating 2015 earthquake. Hondurans and Nicaraguans got their designation back in 1999. That year, Hurricane Mitch resulted in the deaths of around 10,000 people in Central America. Secretary Noem says the situation in each of these countries has since improved. The appeals court's decision now allows the administration to move forward with ending protections for nearly 89,000 people. It comes amid attempts to end TPS for around 300,000 Haitians in the U.S. A judge last week ruling that termination unlawful. The administration is appealing that decision.
The Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Border Security and Immigration is having a hearing to examine the fraud in Minnesota. Let's listen in.
And erode trust within our communities. They're also tools used by criminal networks, foreign intelligence services, and terrorist organizations to conceal their activities in the United States. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. We're going to pause here for a moment. I know Senator Durbin is here, the ranking member. And Senator Durbin, do you have any opening remarks you'd like to make?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the troubling first weeks of this year, federal immigration agents shot and killed 2 of our fellow Americans in Minneapolis. These killings followed other instances of brutal violence and arrests in Minneapolis, Chicago, and cities around our country. Under the Trump administration, we've seen an unprecedented number of deaths in federal immigration detention, one of which was recently ruled a homicide. Desperate families are waiting for answers to many others. These are the devastating impacts of this administration's reckless, aggressive mass deportation campaign. As members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it's our responsibility, committee and legal responsibility, to conduct much-needed oversight of the Trump administration and to have a reasoned, bipartisan discussion on how to stop these abuses of power and fix the broken immigration system. Instead, we're having our second hearing in 2 weeks, demonizing an entire community based on a few individuals' misconduct. Quite simply, the Republicans on this committee are working overtime for the Trump administration's attacks on lawfully admitted refugees. This administration shot down refugee admissions on day one, except for white Afrikaners. They've justified this decision based on alleged fraud. To be clear, under the Biden administration, refugees went through multi-layered, rigorous vetting processes considered the gold standard of vetting. In contrast, under this administration, from the comfort of their homes in South Africa, Afrikaners can apply for a refugee program using a Google form. This processing takes less than a month in South Africa, and it shows. Consider one recently arrived Afrikaner refugee. He made disgusting anti-Semitic posts in 2023 before he was admitted to this country as a refugee. Yet he was approved in record time by this administration, even as the administration claims it will revoke visas for, quote, anti-Semitic activity. At the same time, this administration is rounding up lawfully admitted refugees. In recent weeks, immigration agents have arrested over 100 refugees with no criminal record in Minnesota and flew them to detention centers in Texas for, quote, interviews, close quote. Some were released in the middle of the night, thousands of miles from home. They had no idea where they were. They were not even given paperwork or identification. These individuals had immigrated the right way to the United States. Many waited for years in refugee camps overseas. They underwent extensive vetting by the Department of Homeland Security and other federal agencies. They arrived on flights coordinated by the U.S. government. It is wrong to treat these refugees like they're fraudsters. So why is the government putting these highly vetted refugees in shackles, transporting them thousands of miles from home, and interviewing them in detention? We only have to look to the president's own words. He has repeatedly made bigoted and racist attacks on Somali immigrants, calling them, quote, garbage, close quote. He has said repeatedly he doesn't want immigrants from, I'm not going to use the word that he used, S-hole countries. How do I know he said that? I was sitting in the Oval Office with him when he said it. The racist attacks have not stopped with immigrants. Just last week, Trump posted a disgusting racist image of former President Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle. They are my personal friends. Barack was my colleague. I was the first senator to endorse him for president. I resent what President Trump created an image that was so demeaning to this man and his wife. His staff took the image down, but he refuses to apologize. The words, I'm sorry, are not in the president's vocabulary. This racism should have no place in our society or in our immigration system, and it should have no place in this committee. Let's be clear. Fraud is a crime and it should be prosecuted. I will remind everyone that it was the Biden Justice Department that opened the Minnesota fraud investigation and brought the first prosecution. And it is the Trump Justice Department that has diverted prosecutors and FBI agents away from fraud investigations to focus on the president's mass deportation campaign. Refugees are some of the most vulnerable and most vetted individuals in the United States. We can target fraud without shackling and detaining them in the dead of night. It is time we reject these racist attacks and restore order and humanity in our immigration system. I yield.
Mr. Beer.
Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Padilla, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. For nearly half a century, the Cato Institute's research has shown that people of any ancestry, background, or birthplace can be assets in a free society. America's immigrants exemplify this truth. Despite often leaving terrible conditions abroad, immigrants work, start businesses, and invent at higher rates than the US-born population. Cato's recent analysis shows that immigrants reduced deficits by $11.5 trillion over the last 30 years, including about $140 billion in Minnesota. Although welfare fraud is a serious problem, immigrants aren't to blame. Non-citizens account for just 5% of welfare fraud losses, 31% less per capita than U.S. citizens. Rather than targeting entire ethnic groups, Congress should end the broken welfare systems, namely the oversight-free aid to states that led to all the fraud in Minnesota. But let's be clear, DHS isn't anti-fraud. DHS is itself openly carrying out the largest fraud in the history of the U.S. immigration system. DHS and the State Department are raking in billions of dollars in immigration fees and not providing the adjudications that applicants are entitled to. For individuals for over 90 countries, half of all legal immigrants, the administration is simply not processing their applications. The burden of proof is already on these applicants. DHS and state can deny anyone who fails to make their case. Instead, this administration is pocketing thousands of dollars from hardworking Americans and their relatives, including spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens, and then not even looking at their applications. This is a scam. It is fraud. DHS's entire Minnesota operation is another kind of scam sold to the public on lies. DHS hasn't criminally charged anyone with fraud there, and 60% of its immigrant arrests in Minnesota have no criminal convictions or charges. DHS itself classifies just 8% of its arrests in Minnesota as the highest threat level, and 3/4 of arrests it classifies as not being a threat at all. Instead of arresting fraudsters, it's seeking to jail 5,600 legal vetted refugees, nursing mothers, single parents, long-term residents, already dragged away from their families without any evidence of fraud at all. Rather than a law enforcer, DHS has become the biggest lawbreaker in America today. In less than a year, DHS has attacked the First, the Second, the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, 10th, 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the writ of habeas corpus, the independent judiciary, and much more. Every day, masked DHS agents detain Americans based on their race and demographics. They arrest legal immigrants for criticizing their foreign policy and Americans for recording them doing it. They threaten, assault, and even shoot people for exercising their First and their Second Amendment rights. They break into our homes without judicial
warrants. And you were just watching a congressional hearing examining the fraud in Minnesota with the first witness from the Cato Institute saying that immigrants bring down deficits. Cuba is warning international airlines that jet fuel will no longer be available on the island starting today. It's the latest sign of worsening conditions as the U.S. is cutting off the communist-run nation's oil supply. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the story.
Cuba is issuing a notice to airlines saying jet fuel is no longer available on the island. The nation is implementing a fuel rationing plan as the U.S. is cutting off the communist-run nation's oil supply.
Urgent measures must be taken because people who are going to travel far away if there is no fuel, I don't know if their flights will be canceled.
Cuba has historically relied on Venezuela to provide most of its jet fuel. But the nation has not received any oil from its top ally since mid-December, when the US moved to block the South American nation's exports.
Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it.
In late January, President Trump signed an executive order to impose a tariff on countries that sell or provide oil to Cuba. On Monday, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed that oil shipments from Mexico to Cuba have been halted. But she says Mexico still seeks to support the people of Cuba. 2 vessels carrying around 800 tons of humanitarian aid departed Mexico on Sunday to support the island.
We're going to help the people of Cuba, as we've always helped at any time peoples who need it. And now food was sent mainly, and more is going to be sent.
Cuba's fuel rationing plan is set to last until March 11. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The Trump administration says it plans to fund free speech initiatives in Europe. State Department Undersecretary Sarah B. Rogers discussing the initiative yesterday in Budapest alongside a top aide to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
You don't have self-governance without freedom of speech. You can't have democratic deliberation if viewpoints are proscribed from the public square. The bottom line in Europe is that the point of American foreign policy is to make America safe, strong, and prosperous. And that means we want safe, strong, prosperous allies.
The initiative will include grants to support free expression after laws like the European Union's Digital Services Act and Britain's Online Safety Act. The Trump administration criticized these rules for restricting the free speech of American tech firms and stifling voices of critical immigration. In December, the administration warned censoring speech and suppressing criticism of immigration was leading to what it called civilizational erasure. Vice President J.D. Vance is in Azerbaijan meeting with the country's president. The 2 leaders signed a strategic partnership agreement. The agreement aims to launch a fresh chapter in economic and security cooperation. Here's the vice president. Azerbaijan's president says the 2 nations are entering a new phase in cooperation on defense sales and artificial intelligence. He adds that the countries will also continue cooperation in energy security and counterterrorism. The vice president's visit comes a day after he was in Armenia. Vance has come away with an agreement on nuclear energy with Armenia. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on the agreement that could net billions of dollars in American exports.
Vice President J.D. Vance and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan signed the accord on civilian nuclear energy yesterday. Vance is on a 2-day visit to Armenia.
This is one of the oldest Christian countries in the entire world, a true bedrock of Christian civilization and culture. As a devout Christian myself, I know the meaning of this country to the entire world and to the religion that the Prime Minister and I share.
The 2 leaders completed negotiations on a so-called 1-2-3 agreement, permitting the United States to export nuclear technology and equipment. Vance called the agreement a classic win-win deal for Armenia and the U.S.
It means stronger energy security for my own country, and it also I think means stronger energy security for Armenia, and it's also going to create a lot of new jobs back home in the United States. It means small modular reactors. American technology is going to be coming to this country, and again,
Vance said the deal could bring as much as $5 billion in initial U.S. exports to Armenia, as well as $4 billion in long-term contracts for fuel and maintenance. The new agreement could advance the former Soviet republic's move away from the orbit of Russia, especially if the United States wins the bid to build an energy plant. President Trump in January said Vance would travel to Armenia and Azerbaijan to bolster a peace accord signed in Washington in August.
Peace is not made by cautious people. Peace is not made by people who are too focused on the past. Peace is made by people who are focused on the future.
The peace deal stopped decades of hostilities over the Nagorno-Karabakh region.
I think that we really do have an opportunity not just to create a historic peace that can last, as you said, one that could reach the point of no return. I believe that we are at the point where we could actually have Armenia serve as an important anchor for economic development in this region of the world.
On his trip, Vance is promoting the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIP. The segment is a planned 27-mile corridor spanning southern Armenia. The route would also circumvent Russia and Iran, rerouting energy and trade from Moscow. It would provide Azerbaijan direct access to its Nakhchivan exclave and its ally Turkey. An exclave is a portion of a country that is separate from the main territory. The trip also seeks to establish U.S. relations via agreements on nuclear cooperation, semiconductors, and defense equipment.
This thing is scary looking. It's pretty awesome.
The second family can be seen here, arriving in Armenia. Today, Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance attended a wreath-laying ceremony at the Armenian Genocide Memorial to honor the victims of the 1915 Armenian Genocide. The genocide was carried out mainly through the mass murder of around 1 million Armenians, during death marches to the Syrian desert, and the forced Islamization of others, primarily women and children. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The vice president had more to say on the deals with Armenia, addressing reporters this morning. Vance also discussed visiting a genocide memorial in Armenia and commented on negotiations over Greenland.
I feel very good about where we are. I think the president struck a great peace deal, and I think the administration is really making it stick. I do think that some of our allies have underinvested in Arctic security. And if we're going to invest in Arctic security, if we're going to basically pay a lot of money and be on the hook for protecting this massive landmass, I think it's only reasonable for the United States to get some benefit out of that. I thought out of a sign of respect, both for the victims, but also for the Armenian government that's been a very important partner for us in the region, to Prime Minister Pashinyan, I wanted to go and pay a visit and pay my respects.
Vance also discussed the Board of Peace meeting next week. He says President Trump is very excited to host a whole group of leaders from across the world. Vance says he believes the Board of Peace will be a new model on how to create and maintain peace. The vice president says the United Nations has not lived up to its potential in that regard, despite its importance. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with President Trump tomorrow. The Israeli leader explains the main focus of the meeting.
On this trip, we will discuss a series of issues: Gaza, the region, but of course, first and foremost, the negotiations with Iran.
Netanyahu said it's his 7th trip to the United States since Trump started his second term. The Israeli leader says the frequency reflects the bond between the two countries. The pair had been expected to meet next week, but the talks were brought forward amid the renewed engagement with Iran. President Trump says he is halting approval of a new international bridge linking Michigan and Ontario, Canada. He is calling for negotiations on the project to restart. Trump questioned Canadian ownership of the Gordie Howe International Bridge and argued the United States should receive greater economic benefits. He also criticized Ontario's ban on U.S. alcohol sales, Canada's dairy policies, and recent Canadian agreements involving China. The $6.4 billion bridge is funded by Canada and is owned by the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. The Obama administration approved the agreement in 2013. Construction of the bridge is now complete and testing is underway. Canadian officials have not yet responded publicly. Trump previously expressed support for completing the cross-border project during his first term. Now, you've likely received your tax documents by now. That means the clock is ticking to file your taxes. The Trump administration made a lot of changes under the Big Beautiful Bill that could mean a lower tax bill and a higher refund for filers. Take a look at this.
The deadline to file your 2025 taxes is quickly approaching.
I would just get it done as soon as possible.
Lisa Green-Lewis is a CPA and tax expert with TurboTax. Here's what she says you need to know. First, a higher standard deduction. That means more of your money is shielded from federal taxes. For single filers, it increases to $15,750, up from $15,000. For married couples filing jointly, it increases to $31,500, up from $30,000. Second, a higher state and local tax deduction, commonly known as SALT. It allows you to deduct your state and local income taxes or your state and local general sales taxes. That cap jumps to $40,000 from $10,000 for married couples filing together. You may also be able to deduct your property taxes as long as your income or sales taxes doesn't put you over that $40,000 cap.
In those high property tax states and state tax states, they'll be able to claim some more of those deductions.
Third, a larger tax credit for children. Parents can receive $2,200 per child. They must be under 17 at the end of the tax year, among other requirements. If you work in an industry where you get tips or overtime, there are some changes you need to know about. Eligible workers can deduct up to $25,000 in tipped income.
If you're a service worker, like a firefighter, police officer, you can deduct up to $12,500 in overtime.
Last year, the average refund was around $3,100, according to the IRS. With these new changes, some can expect an even higher refund.
We are expecting filers to see up to $1,000 increase in their refund or lower balance due.
The deadline to file your taxes is April 15th.
A new investigation by the BBC sheds light on an illegal industry in China where hidden cameras are planted in hotel rooms to secretly film people during intimate moments and then sell the footage online without consent. The BBC team identified 54 hidden cameras live streaming from hotel rooms over a 7-month investigation. Joining us to discuss this is Chris Chappell, host of the show China Uncensored. Chris, good afternoon. And this just sounds crazy, but you've covered such issues. How big is the problem?
Oh, it's pretty widespread. A couple years ago, there was a Chinese blogger by the name of Shadows Never Lie. And he uncovered this problem that a lot of these hotels, guest houses in China, they install hidden cameras and record people in some pretty intimate moments. And there is a big market for this on things like the dark web and whatnot. So it's pretty widespread, and it's a way of making a lot of money.
Okay, who is doing this? I mean, are the hotel owners involved?
Well, there's some deniability that the hotel owners have because they can say, "Oh, it was some other guest who installed the cameras." But in the case I mentioned before, what the concern was that the hotel owners were working in conjunction with local police, and it was a way for local governments to raise money. Local governments in China have a lot of economic distress. They're not allowed to levy taxes, and so they often look for creative ways of making money, especially after real estate collapsed in China. So I wouldn't say it's impossible that this is a money-making scheme that kind of goes straight to the top.
Okay, so how many figures are we talking about here? How much money is being made?
I don't think anyone has an exact estimate because nobody knows how widespread the issue is. This isn't something that the Chinese Communist Party wants getting out there. I mean, they want tourism happening within China and people going. The BBC documentary talks about a couple that discovered watching some of these channels that stream hidden cameras that it was the guy and his girlfriend. So it's pretty popular.
It's wild. Imagine seeing yourself online and just, I mean, what are Chinese
I see
authorities?
myself online, but not like that.
I see you too online, but right, not in
not like
that
that.
light, not in that. Okay, what are Chinese authorities doing about this?
As far as I can tell, some perfunctory kind of, we're looking into it. Often it's the case where they will try to blame individual people. It's definitely not anything that ties back to any local government or the police. But in the case of the streamer I talked about, the blogger, Shadows Never Lie, there was a lot of pressure on him to be quiet about the situation, that he was damaging the reputation of hotels and guest houses throughout the country. And that, he was the real culprit.
So, Chris, I was watching your coverage on this on your channel, China Uncensored. It was a terrific coverage, and I encourage our viewers to take a look at it. But you said the secret footage could actually even be used for blackmail material. Could you just expand a little bit on that?
Sure. So it's known that China uses honey traps, where they send a pretty young woman to an official, visiting official, businessman, and then films them in compromising situations and uses it as blackmail. Earlier today I saw this video of these new Chinese robots that they're designed to look like women, and I'm sure in the future they will be used for all kinds of things, and I'm sure they're just one giant spyware.
What if Terminator is actually those Chinese robots that look like women? can you imagine that? Okay.
I would watch that movie.
Speaking of which, can you talk to us about China's larger surveillance state? What is the extent that people are being monitored?
Oh, China is on another level. There are, I forget the exact number, but there's I want to say 10 or 11 security cameras per person. I could be wrong, but it's overwhelming the amount of surveillance that goes on in China. And that's actually one of the reasons they want to make a lot of breakthroughs in AI development, because there's just simply so much surveillance, not just cameras, but also monitoring people online and every interaction that happens online, that they need these AI tools to be able to process that amount of data.
And just finally, what is the CCP doing with this data? Is it for control? Is it for something else? What is the main purpose?
Well, if you're targeting like a U.S. government official or businessman, it's manipulation of some kind or another. It could also be within the Chinese Communist Party itself, being able to bribe and blackmail your own businessmen or rivals. But I think a lot of it is they're just trying to collect so much data that they just view it as something that's in their interest. And I don't think until they really get the breakthrough with the AI that they will even really be able to make use of a lot of it.
Well, all right, Chris, thank you for joining us today. And I'll just mention one more time, our viewers watching, please check out Chris's channel, China Uncensored, on YouTube. It's terrific. Thank you so much today, Chris.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
House lawmakers are meeting today over whether nonprofits are being exploited by foreign actors such as China. The House Ways and Means Committee says the panel will focus on how money is funneled through these nonprofits, including environmental groups, as a way to shape U.S. policy. Senator Ted Cruz last year accused the Chinese Communist Party of working through environmental groups to file lawsuits against fossil fuel companies. And the former campaign advisor of a Southern California city council member was sentenced to 4 years in prison yesterday. He was accused of acting as an agent for China without notifying U.S. authorities. Sun Yaoning, also known as Mike Sun, worked as a campaign advisor in the 2022 city council race in Arcadia, a Los Angeles suburb. He was arrested at the end of 2024. Prosecutors say he sought to influence U.S. politicians on the issue of Taiwan and to suppress Chinese dissidents on U.S. soil, including practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual group persecuted by Beijing. Sun also kept close tabs on then Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen during her April 2023 visit to Southern California, reporting her movements directly to Chinese officials. On top of all that, he ran a news website aimed at the local Chinese American community, posting content that supported the Chinese Communist Party. And on Friday, the president will travel to Fort Bragg in North Carolina to meet with the special forces who successfully brought dictator Nicolas Maduro out of Venezuela in January.